Welcome to Hot Topics After Dark with your free DeShawn, strategic advisor, coach, and author. Let's get talking.
Hello, fams, faves, likes, and loves, and those souls I have yet to meet. This is Jeffrey DeShawn, the Inspired Muse, and we are back with Hot Topics After Dark. Now, it has been a little hiatus since we started with our first series of episodes. I'm excited to be back, and there's been a lot going on, even since we started and then took a little break. So I'm really, really honored to be launching the Hot Topics After Dark conversations back again today. And with if you look up ace, boom, cool is how they say it, like the old people used to say it in the dictionary. And then you do that like Jeffrey Richardson DeShawn, you probably gonna find this picture right here. Like, I know her, I call her as my Kim Possible, but I'm going to respect all of her education and all of her amazingness and responsibility and everything she does in the world and call her by her full-grown government name. Dr. Kimberly Morton is with us today. Dr. Morton, welcome and thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you. My BFF, my ride or die. I'm so excited to be here on your show. Can't wait to have this conversation around education. And man, we're about to do this.
Yes. I'm so happy that you're here. I started this as a platform with, as you know, our good friend, Q Wiggins, because there was a lot going on. And Q and I have a lot of conversations. As you know, you were there when we launched it. Like, we have a lot of conversations and sort of that feeling of wanting to share because we feel like other people are having conversations and we have something to put in the whole to contribute to the whole. And so I'm excited to launch this back and to have you at this critical time when, at this point in the COVID pandemic, and our national and I think global pandemic around racism and isms, we're sort of coming to a chrysalis of us adult folk have been managing this thing, dealing with COVID. We had George Floyd's murder and this reckoning around race and conversation, not just the United States, but globally. Thank you, brothers and sisters across the globe. And now in the United States, we're talking about sending our children back to what is supposed to be considered safe space everywhere, right? And particularly in America. School, educational settings. And I don't think nobody feels safe. I know I'm still struggling with safety when I go out into community, shopping, reconnecting with people now. And so I've been having conversations with friends, family, about their kids. How do they manage this? And I feel the anxiety, and I do not have children. So I wanted to have this conversation particularly with you. You have worked from K through 12. You know the system. You know the institutions. You've been an educator. You have been caretaker of young people. You have nieces and nephews. Like, you are so invested in the reality of what like education is in America, and particularly I think for me, as you talk and I have talked about, like the embodiment of Black women who led this fight for Black people to be educated in America, and you are a part of that, where you are in our generation revolution. And so here we are. What do you got to say?
So like you, I have a lot of anxiety around going back, right? So right now I'm currently in higher ed. However, I've worked K-12, done government, now in higher ed. And I have a lot of anxiety around going back because I think a lot of it is, around, funding, money, things of that nature. And not really, people aren't really thinking about the public safety, right? I've had friends who have passed away. I've had sorority sisters who have passed away. And it is so heartbreaking to think that, in our country, we're thinking more about financial gains or economic gains than putting people in harm's way of this COVID-19. And I think that you know, what's going to happen to the children if they go back? So if they go back, K-12, let's just talk about K-12 first, then we'll talk about higher ed.
Yeah.
K-12, if they go back, first day of school, getting on the bus.
Oof.
That's number one.
I have not,
Right?
Kim,
So,
I have not been on a bus. You are talking about putting our children on a bus. Most of us, unless like you've had to, like, ain't been on a bus since
right. So you get on the bus, you're not 6 feet away. How is that even going to be possible? Normally 2 people sit to a seat. What's that going to look like? And, you know, you may have places where, you know, people drop off their children. That's different, right? But then what about the students who have to ride the bus, right? Usually it's black and brown children. Like, what is that going to look like, right? And so you're on the bus, then you get off the bus, then you go into the school, go to eat breakfast, right?
You triggering me as me right now. Like, you triggering me as me. Like this, I'm going to the store. I walk down the street to the ATM, and I get to the door at the ATM, and if I can't catch the door before somebody get there, and I got on gloves, and I'm still not trying to use the gloves. I'm like,
right.
Well, now you talk about my babies.
Right. So then, you know, in the classroom, then restroom breaks, right? This first day of school. First day of school. So what happens when you have all of these children, right, who may be asymptomatic, go home, take it to parents? Then what happens? Or grandparents, right? So nobody's really thinking about the implications of it. They're just thinking about, okay, this funding, this money, this state money, you know, nobody's thinking about, well, what if they get it? And Betsy DeVos is talking about only, you know, 2% of the students or whatever, but then they're going to give it to their parents and then their grandparents, right? So what is that going to look like, right? So that's K-12, right? I've given you one full day, right?
So if I can take, like, when we haven't
even gotten to lunch yet.
I mean, you haven't even gotten to lunch, and I am like, I'm itching over here because I'm back in like full on, like, you know, not just, I don't know what's the next level beyond a pandemic. I don't know, what do they call it after a pandemic? Because, so I have a master's in social work.
Right.
I have not practiced clinical social work in a while. I'm actually getting back into clinical social work. It's I think it's needed dramatically in this moment. But I started off in school and community settings, as you know, Kim, residential settings. And so you said a couple things. You said a couple words that just triggered me about they're gonna carry it home. Because I remember that entire time that I worked in school settings, I had strep throat all the time.
Really?
Like strep throat. Yeah. And my doctor's like, well, you work in school. Like, you constantly, you know, kids carry stuff. And so this is not about triggering additional anxiety or fear, but it's that I think that, and I've said it, you know, in this platform and other platforms before, we have to acknowledge the reality of what is. We can't pretend for the sustainment of institutions and economic systems of the past that, you know, nothing has changed. So as a person who just worked in schools as a paraprofessional, I wasn't a classroom academic core curriculum teacher. I taught other things, social work, sex ed. Like, I was a character development kind of person. I know what that they're going to take it back home means, but they're also going to take it to the teachers too. Because as a person working in the school, things come up, and it's just like, we have to acknowledge this, right? It's not about fear, but we know this to be the case. So what do we do?
So then what happens when they do take it home and take it to the grandparents? You know, then, you know, they have to report it out. Then, you know, what are these students going to do? And so we have to be cognizant of that, you know. And I don't think that people are really thinking about the implications. Everybody's just like, oh, well, we got to get our kids back to school. Well, do we? So do we?
Dr. Kim Possible is in the house. I mean, Dr. Kim Possible will let us know what is possible, honey. Do we? Do we actually have to get our children back to those schools?
Yeah.
Do we?
Right. Do we? You know, we could, you know, homeschool, Also, you know, I'm writing with some other folks a curriculum for online for K-12. Like, take it back to the basics. Like, we can school our children, right? And I understand that. Unfortunately, a lot of the students, Black and brown students, parents are on the front lines, right? The grocery stores, the medical field, all of these things that they may not be able to do this, but you know, as a community, we need to come together and figure out ways that we can help each other and help our children. So if that means, you know, the neighbor across the street is, you know, homeschooling via Zoom, right? Children, right? And we just sort of trust that our children will be fine to be online to do this, right? That's, you know, one thing, but we need to figure out ways to create a system for ourselves because other people are doing it, right? As we've read in articles, folks are, other cultures are homeschool or bringing teachers in, right? So do we need to bring teachers in via Zoom or in person? And I don't know if people will be comfortable with that, but we need to think of creative ideas and ways in which we can teach our children that, and make sure it's accredited and all that kind of stuff so they can go to college and all that. But, you know, we need to come up with creative ways to do this for our kids, because at the end of the day, we're all we got, you know?
Hey.
And thinking about creative ways to do that. So now let me talk about K-12, right? So, I mean, I'm sorry, higher education.
Yes, because that's a whole nother ball game. Like, I cannot imagine, like, that's a whole nother, I have a good girlfriend whose daughter's at HBCU, Eastern Coast, Seaboard.
Right.
And prior to the COVID pandemic, it was already, you know, and then having to bring your child home, not knowing. And so now, you know, going into sophomore year, what do? What do you send your baby back? They barely got to finish their freshman year. I mean, they made it to the top of spring, right? Before having to coming home, but they had a good experience. So they want to go back. And the schools is like, come back because, I mean, we got to pay. So we got to justify that check. Right, so come back. What do they do?
Yeah, schools are losing a lot of money right now, and you know, I just don't know. I'm gonna take you through just like I took through K-12.
Okay. Yes. Because I can't even imagine. Yes. Okay, let me get myself together. Let me get myself together. Because in K-12, you just walk to the door, you come back and get them. I'm thinking about freshman day in Carolina. You know, the drop off and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I got my trusty. This is my stress ball. I need a big stress ball because there's a lot of stress going on in the world. This is my stress ball.
Yeah, right. So you come back, orientation, right? Move in. Let's just do move in. Okay? Let's just do move in. So we come back, we move it in, right? So some places are saying, you know, we're not going to allow parents, grandparents, whoever to move you in, but we're going to help you move in, whatever. We move in, right? We wipe down everything. You got to wear a mask, right? At all times. All right. So you move in, everything's good. That's move in. Move in night. Okay. Nobody's there. Okay. Move in night. Okay. Nobody's there. No masks. You eating food. You partying. You kicking it up.
The pizza is flowing and you just grab it and tap.
You know, so that's move-in night. That's not even first day of school, right? You ain't even got no orientation. So how's that gonna work? So, and I know that schools are doing like sort of isolation places, or, you know, they're gonna place them in a hotel or a building or whatever in a certain dorm. But thinking about that, well, who's gonna take care of the kids? Right? Because they 18, 19, 20 years old. Who's gonna take care of them? It's not just isolate them. Who's gonna make sure they clean up the throw up, make sure they all right because they're gonna have diarrhea, like all of the things, right, that are happening with folks who getting COVID, right? So then you're gonna go to class. Professors? They older, right? Okay. How's that gonna be? Okay.
Woo! Did you hold on? Did you say they was old?
They're older, more seasoned. More seasoned. They're not old, they're seasoned. Okay. I apologize. They are seasoned.
Experienced.
Experienced
Experience.
and seasoned.
Vulnerable is in the public health
They're in
spectrum.
the vulnerable
Vulnerable.
They're in the vulnerable population. And so thinking about that, what is that gonna look like? So all I'm doing is putting it out here, things that we talk about, the thoughts that we have, just think about it. Like, as a parent, what would you do, right? So it's really about your choice. What would you do? Would you send your child back? Would you homeschool your child? What is that gonna look like? And not the implications are is that your child could bring it to you. So those are the implications. And not only for K-12, but then higher ed, taking it to the professor, you know, the counselor, the four-year advisor, whoever they're in contact with. And so then that person, who do they touch, right? So it's a ripple effect, right? And so I'm not sure that people are really considering all of these implications that can happen in both of these arenas, K-12 and higher ed. But then, you know, that also impacts, right, people's jobs, right? So the parents' jobs, if they have to stay home, what is that gonna look like? Will they be able to work from home? Will they be able to do this for another however long it's gonna take until we get a vaccination? And then, get this, because nobody's thinking about this, we might get the vaccination yet next year, but how many years does it take to really do a vaccination? 5 to 10 years. It's 1 year. Are we taking that? Yes or no? I don't know. You know, so we have to really think about these things, right? And then once we take it, what does that mean? Or if we don't take it, what are the implications if we don't take it?
Yeah.
That mean, right? Are we being tracked? Right? Are we
It just, you know, as I hear you sort of walk through in both scenarios, when we think about, you know, K through 12 and the realities of young people and the realities of our children, our nieces, our nephews, or the children, young people in our lives. And then we think about the reality of the young adults in our lives, you know, college age young people, and all of the questionable factors, like the things that you can't control for. It just keeps bringing me back to a space that as a collective, we have to acknowledge the variances, right? So the factors for one family and their children is totally different than the factors for another. So I think about the family that has both children in K-12 and the child in college. Well, those variables and factors are totally different. And the reality, if I was a parent that had both in K-12 and in college, well, the college age one likely would not be going back because that provides additional support for the ones that are K-12, right? They've advanced through college, so they can actually do tutorial. Like, there's a whole lot of things. And if they were going into education, whether they wanted to or not, there's actually some career experience for them in teaching the younger ones that maybe as a family you could also structure an internship so that they spend part of their day helping to tutor their siblings, but then the other part of the day they do a virtual, or if you're able to in your community, live internship. It just makes me think of the fact that makes me think of the fact that we have to start thinking out of the box, right? So the institutions, these institutions, like our educational systems, were created for the masses, for the whole. How do we create a system where everybody has a pathway and a track for opportunity, regardless of their circumstance? Well, now in this sort of health pandemic, we're back to a space where you kind of got to look at your unique circumstances and then decide a formula for you. Like sending your kids back to school into a traditional education schedule model doesn't have to be the answer. Like, I feel like it's getting people to recognize that what was yesterday, how the system is run, how things have gone has changed. And because of the COVID, like, we can't just run back to it, or we we shouldn't feel like we are obligated to have to just, oh, we got to do things the way we used to do them, because the reality is all those variables continue to be true. Like, I can't imagine, like, you know, like, just the reality of how COVID is, and kids being kids. So as a family, like in having this conversation, I hear like you walk through that. It's like every family has to look at their scenario,
Yeah.
and structure
and
it.
I think we're not trying, what we're not trying to do is put fear into people or anything like that, but just really think about it. Like, really sit down and think about what your scenario could be, or what your situation is, and think about, what the plan, what the plan is. It's now, mid-July, right? Or late July now. And school will start back in August, September for students. And, what are you going to do? What's going to happen? And, I think that, a lot of us are sort of banking on the systems, right? The systems to make the right decision for us. But what's the backup plan, or what's the alternative, or how are you going to deal with it even if we are online? What is that going to look like, right? How are you going to be able to work? How are you going to be able to, you may not have daycare. That's another, nobody's talking about daycare. That's a whole other ball of wax, right?
Daycare. Oh my goodness. I can't even begin to imagine the anxiety around daycare.
And so there's daycare. So then nobody's talking about the students who are disabled. Nobody's talking about special education. Nobody's talking about all these other scenarios or factors that are, intertwined with K-12 education, right? So
well, you make me think of, in saying that, the reality that every day, whether it's K through 12, higher ed, just professional life, we are moving past people, ourselves, that have compromised immune systems, or different levels of immunity strength, I guess is the right word. I'm not a medical professional. And so we don't have to think about those things. There's certain things that we have to acknowledge in settings, and then we account for. But in this scenario, where literally somebody could sneeze on you, and that be the difference, between being healthy today and terminal tomorrow, it's a different ballgame. I just feel like it requires a different mindset, and that we are being required to sort of step out of the institutional trappings of our mind. Like, oh, school starts in August, September, my kid got to be there. My kid got to be on schedule for all the things that normally I wanted my kid to be on schedule for. And I think it just now means we have to lead with health and safety first, and then think about maybe even a longer trajectory for development, because, we think about things in short-term cycles. Oh, they get math here, they get English here the part of the year, then they do the science project, then they do soccer, they do this, they have their trip here. We have all these things that we are enculturated in, like our kids have to have them. But then they have to, and like, I feel like I'm like, parents, you got to second guess some coded stuff that's in your mind, because it's structured the way your life flowed for your health and well-being. Because if you just run back out into system schedule.
Well, and I think that's the most important thing. We have to put our health and safety first. And this is the first time, to be quite honest, that I can remember that since I've been, alive, that we've had a pandemic, number one, but also that we've had to think about our health and safety first, right? In everything that we do. And I think that's the thing that's freaking people out. Like, they've never had to think about this before. And so now it's like, some people are like, oh, well, it's not that many people have died. Well, yeah, 130-some thousand people have died. So it's and we have had all these people in the hospital, so, and recover, which is great, but sending students back to school will increase the amount of folks who have it, right? That's just a given. It'll increase that. And so, are we willing to risk it? Are we willing to risk our lives?
That's the question.
Yeah.
Are we willing to risk our lives? And I think it's twofold. It's, are we willing to risk our lives? Because that's the risk, right? We know what we can lose, like everything, our future and our past. Like, this is my way. Like, you're talking about losing your future and your past. Because here's the thing. People say to me, my mother works in early childhood, and what was put out was that, oh, it's harder for the children to get it. You know, it's less likely to be terminal for the children, what we're saying. Okay, but we also don't know the internal developmental implications. I had a partner who had cancer early as a child, and then that cancer was went into remission through medication, but then came back 20 years later. But the interesting thing was the treatment that treated that cancer completely transformed his body. Completely transformed his body because he experienced that before puberty. So we really don't know, right? And so, and the not knowing of what an illness and a virus and what the treatment can do, you know, to the children, we really don't know anything. And so I just think that folks have to start to think about the bigger picture and sort of out of the sustainment of cultural systems, because I think a lot of what we do is because we don't want to be off schedule with our peers. We don't want our kids to be off schedule with our peers' children. And so if I'm the parent that chooses, and then my kids are, well, you want your kid to be cool and on schedule for tennis and soccer and golf and baseball and basketball, or you want them to be alive? Or you be for it, you want them to actually live past 21. Right? Talk to a parent who's had a child that's had a developmental issue, a medical issue from birth or from age. I just think that folks need to sort of broaden, like this has been presented so much early on as sort of a new, just any of your average sort of medical, crisis issues, we're going to move beyond it and get back to normal. And I don't think there's getting back to normal. And I'm not hearing that as I talk to people professionally with coaching, or folks more and more who I coach professionally, but now their personal dynamic of trying to figure out how they keep a professional brand and navigate personal life is merging, because I want to do this work and need this work, but I have small children.
Right. No, I agree. I think you're right on point. Things have merged, but also I know for me, I have to definitely be safe, right? I haven't left the house all, in weeks, because I just don't want to be at the grocery store, right? My zip code happens to be the #1 zip code for COVID, and I want to go outside. So I think that we just have to all be safe and healthy and figure out what's right for our situation, but also recognize the risk that you're taking, because that's really what it is. You got to recognize the risk and figure out if that's the best thing for your family or what you need to do. But I think you have to weigh the risk.
No, definitely. Well, thank you, Dr. Kimberly Morton, Dr. Kim Possible, because y'all don't know this, so I should say. Dr. Kimberly Morton, Dr. Kim Possible, is a expert in education, K through 12 and higher ed. She has chosen to share her gift and spend a chunk of her career really helping first-generation college students transition and really be able to successfully transition through that, matriculate and graduate and move on to careers. And as now looking at how do we build upon that experience of now generations and generations of first-generation students to ensure that we create academic curriculums pre-college, right, in that K through 12 genre that really help anchor minority, Black, Brown, LGBT, queer, young people, international, like other folks in that experience. And so I just want to thank you for being a part of this conversation. I'm looking forward to our future conversations, because we're going to have more. Will be another conversation, and so we hit on a little K through 12 today. We hit on some higher ed, and so we're going to go back and do a series, and we're going to talk about some K through 12 strategies. Dr. Kim Possible has been a teacher. She's structured programs, middle school, high school. She's a go-to, folks. And so we're going to talk about some strategies. We're going to focus K through 12, and then we're going to talk about y'all folks, particularly who have kids who are going into college in the coming year, right? So some people that have decided, because this happened in the spring, you're going to do your gap year. So you were set up to do service, so you delayed a year. for those folks in the next 2 years, you got kids going to college. What does this now look like for you? What are some strategies? We're going to have that coming up in the next couple of weeks. So each week you're going to have some new tidbits from Dr. Kim Possible on that. And so I just want to thank y'all for tuning in. Happy to be back. Our children are our future. Whitney told us, the goddess told us, the goddess, good doctor from the world, Dr. Whitney Houston. And I believe that now more than ever, as we start to set strategy, and as we dismantling things on one hand and building on another, that in the middle, we got to look and say, what do we want for our children? We got to ask our children, what do they need? And then we have to go forth and engage them and create it and making it possible. And in that, as I always say, all things are possible and nothing is out of reach. And I'm going to turn that over and the close out to Dr. Kim Possible, because all things are possible. So what you got to say, girl?
I just want to say thank you so much for bringing me on to your show today. I just want to express how grateful I am to be here on the show, and also to really talk to the parents about, making the right choice, right? And so figuring out a way that your student or your child can be educated and thinking outside of the box. Really think about the risk. Think about ways that you can be creative and make sure your child, gets the education that they need. But really think about this as a health crisis, right? We have to stay healthy. We have to protect our children. And with that, I want to say thank you so much again. And yeah, this is a great conversation. So I look forward to talking with you more about education, K-12, higher ed, all that good stuff, and even pre-K, right? Because we have K and daycare.
I get nervous when we start talking about the early childhood babies. I don't even know. Even know where to begin.
There's a lot of implications. I have a neighbor who has about six kids that she watches like for daycare. She says she's shutting down. So that's 6 families, right?
And this is the thing, people. She's shutting down, and that's an impact on those families who trusted and depended upon her. And in an environment like this, you want a smaller setting, but that's also impact on her income. She's shutting down because she has to prioritize her health and the fear of that and her family, because I'm sure she does it in a residential setting. But that's going to have an income implication. So as communities, we can't sit and think about these things in silo. And so the tip I'm going to end this segment and say today is, know that there's somebody else that relies on you. So it doesn't matter what the service is, whether it's formal or informal, because there's a lot of us that work in a formal economy where we're still bartering and trading, where cash and commerce and cash apps and purchasing other things is a part of that. Take stock of who relies on you, and let's collectively start to think about how we can help each other meet the supply needs that we have. That's it. Is the word.
That's it. That's a word.
We can help each other meet those supply needs, and it's not all about, that thing that God and God we trust printed on it. That's paper and green.
Right. No.
Until next time.
Yeah, we all have gifts.
Say it again, and then
we all have gifts, and so we need to figure out what our gifts are so we can trade and barter with those gifts. If we all came together with all of our gifts, man, we'll be a powerful people.
Until next time.